Welcome to the new normal. I'm your host, Lisa Davis, aka Litecoin Lisa, and I hope you're ready to walk on the dark side a little bit. We've got a little storytelling, but it's going to be a little scary bedtime story. I Am For I Am from Den.social is here to tell us a little story. So jump in the live chat if you're here with us watching live. If you're watching later, make sure you leave us a comment below, but make sure you click that like button and share this story out there. It's a good one. Welcome back. I am glad to have you.
Hello, Lisa.
Joining
I got my black tee.
Oh, wow.
I'm wearing black in a black background because we're going to talk about deep, dark shadows decades ago to the present. How about that?
Sounds great. I wore a black hat.
Nice.
Yeah, I got to bring a little bit of light, but you know.
There you go. There you go.
I'll have the night light on.
Yeah, it's something that I ran across maybe a month ago, 2 months ago, and kind of went back and dug into it a little bit deeper to do like fact checking.
Okay.
And, some of it bits and pieces, you know, were scattered along the way back in history that I remember hearing about, and kind of all came together. And so tonight we'll talk about how can we say we'll call it a story. How's that? Or we'll kind of change some names to protect the innocent, or company names or whatever, so it doesn't come back to us. So there'll be fact and fiction. How's that?
Sounds good. People can use their imagination.
It's up to anyone to decide what is fact and what is fiction, or do their own research.
Okay, sounds good.
So, how you been, Lisa?
I'm good. I'm good. Oh, this movie's getting long.
I know. And I've definitely been in the black pill arena for the last few weeks. And I apologize, I wasn't able to do last week. Guess what? My wife's grandmother turned 99 last Friday. And we had family in from out of town on Monday traveling through, because she turned 99 in Mexico, by the way. So amazing.
My dogs are celebrating.
I don't hear them. But so anyway, we had family passing through our home after the party on Friday, and
that's incredible, though. 99. Wow.
Yeah, she lived a hard, tough life.
Really?
And to still be on this earth and as healthy as she is,
that's great.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And it's those kind of genes we all wish we had, right?
I think so.
I don't know. Yeah, you think so.
Days, I'm like, well.
Oh, but then there's ignorance, and ignorance is bliss, right?
Yeah. Some days
knowing what we know is probably going to shorten our lives.
That might be a great option too. Yeah. It's being curious, you know, what do they say? Curiosity killed the cat, you know.
Good point.
And then there's those satisfaction days that do make it feel like it's worth it. So
I need to spend more time in nature and hear the birds chirping and feel the nice warm sun more often. Even though I walk the dogs every day, sometimes I still have my headphones on listening to some, you know, woo-woo or podcast or conspiracy thing. And that's just what I fill my life with. And so I probably need to slow down again, you know.
There's a lot of information out there. I have some friends that will take a like a media vacation or a technology vacation, where they're just like, you know what, I am just going to disconnect for a weekend or a week or a day. And you know what, when they get back in, come here. It's all still there for them.
That's true. That's true. And you can get caught up.
It might be a good mental health thing for all of us to do every once in a while.
Right. I think I might need to do that. Maybe I'll unplug after this podcast tonight because yeah, it's pretty sinister stuff, and it touches my family, what we're going to talk about, and many others, I'm sure. So and let's hope it's not true. How about that? Let's hope that this story I'm going to tell tonight is fiction. So
Okay.
we ready to get into it?
Let's jump into it.
All right. So hence the dark screen, and like I said, my black tea, and um, so what we have here is this was our thumbnail, um, and so we're going to say that this story is a deathbed confession, and it's an ex-CIA agent, or let's just call that this person, Agent X. I don't know what to call him. Um, and I guess maybe the subtitle might be The Bioweapon Within. And this was a story that was told to me, then it and bits and pieces, and then it was all put together by a neurosurgeon. Some of you might know him when I introduce him into the story. And some of you will hear different parts of history because we're going to go back to early 1950s, and you're going to go, aha, or oh, really? Well, that's what it was. And we'll hear about heroes, of course, and we're going to have a lot of evildoers. So, like I said, some of it is going to be fact and fiction. It's up to you to decide what is and what isn't. And it's storytelling to protect those in the know. How's that?
That sounds good. Everybody
So
can do their own research and decide for themselves.
that's right. That's right. So he introduced Agent X, who makes a phone call because he knows his time is limited. And but there are things that have now weighed heavily on us. He's looking back at his life and the things that he saw and witnessed, things he was a part of, the things that need to be said, and maybe out of guilt, or maybe because Agent X sees the future and where it's going. And so, what I'm going to tell you tonight is going to be a little shocking, amazing, terrifying, and it's probably going to bring up, fits of anger as well. So let's dig into Agent X's story. And it really starts with this person, Dr. Alton Oshner, and soft tissue cancers. And he founded the Oshner Health Founders. He's there at the bottom left, by the way, in that photo. But Agent X describes him as, how can I put this? Fauci is Dr. Oshner 2.0. He is the original Fauci. For those of you who dislike Fauci or think that what he did while he was in power, shall we say, was all of the wrong and evil. So it's out of his playbook is where Dr. Fauci comes from. So if you want to go to the root and the ugly and the horror, you can look right here. Who's hiding behind the fight against cancer and the cancer, America's National Cancer Society and these kinds of things, and stop smoking is going to cause cancer. This person is bone chilling, what I'm going to tell you about, or what Agent X told me, because it really clawed at his soul and he felt it needed to be said. Oh, that sounds like a werewolf.
Right. She's like 6.5 pounds and she howls like a wildebeest. I don't know. She just,
yeah.
And her dad, of course, is not around here. Stop it.
Of course
no.
not. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay. But he was very ambitious, and he was in Louisiana, Tulane University in that area. And he was kind of the kingpin toward, the National Cancer Society of that time. But who he really was he became the CIA and FBI's golden boy. And he oversaw the rollout of the polio vaccine. Hence, we're going back to 1950 and in 51 in the early 50s. Now, everyone was fearful and scared of polio, that they might get it. And it was kind of like the what we saw with Warp Speed, everything, and what we got to work on is to fight polio and come up with a vaccine, because we had FDR, right, who essentially died because of polio. And so he was in charge of the rollout, and he knew something that was included in that vaccine, and it was called SV40, which is a monkey virus that he knew could cause or create cancer in soft tissue. And when I say soft tissue, I'm talking about in the blood, in the nerves, in cartilage, not like in hard, portions of your body like bone or teeth, but in the soft tissue, the muscles around the organs, this kind of thing. And he knew that that was going to be a problem and probably create a cancer epidemic. He knew that, and he still allowed the polio vaccine to roll out. Now, who brought us the polio vaccine was none other than Dr. Jonas Salk. And, here's pictures of him, and he was kind of considered a hero until we find out later that there was an incident called the Cutter event. Some might have heard it. And the Cutter event actually it was actually hitting millions of people with polio. And so it wasn't really a complete protection. There were probably children that got the polio vaccine and ended up getting polio early on, or maybe they wouldn't have gotten it in the beginning had they not gotten the vaccine. And it was because the polio vaccine was using African green monkeys. And that sounds, innocent, because the way their kidneys are, and there's a scientific reason for using African green monkeys, which we know now carried the SV40. And so he got a black eye. The idea of a Nobel, Peace Prize was kind of scrubbed and hidden because of this Cutter event. Here comes a hero. Bernice Eddy, a vaccine researcher. Well, she wanted to get that polio vaccine and test it out on some monkeys, and she did. And she tested out on these monkeys, and she found out that all of these monkeys ended up getting 100% of them ended up getting the polio. And so she stood up and said, meeting after meeting, and screamed, "You got to stop this. You got to stop the polio vaccine. It's not safe." She was a whistleblower, and what happened? She was crushed. She was crushed by none other than, just like we saw what Fauci did. She was crushed for telling the truth, what her research was showing. She was canceled. So you want to go back to medical history and some of the first cancellations, there you have it, is this woman here who was quite the hero. Her courage, just, as far as Agent X said, her courage haunted him. But it was also a gut punch that someone would allow this vaccine to go, knowing that it could cause cancer in soft tissues, and knowing full well that this was going to be a problem for other kids getting polio. Mm-hmm. So now we enter into, but they went on without listening to her. So then we come on to this individual, Professor Jose Delgado. And I got a quote for him I'm going to show you real quick. How's he come into play? Well, he was a twisted genius, kind of the mad scientist as well. And he was also in Tulane. So all of this has taken place in Tulane, which is in Louisiana. This is before Fort Detrick became the biolabs. This was it. Well, Professor Delgado was kind of involved also in MK Ultra. Sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
He was interested in drilling holes into monkey brains and wire them to try to control behavior. CIA kind of liked this idea. And he wanted to see what other things could be done by sending electrical impulses to the brain. And what he basically is he's kind of the father of RFID tags or chips, which you see there on the finger.
Right.
And because he wanted to manipulate minds. He didn't want to manipulate the brain like someone losing movement in a hand or something. Oh, sure, of course, he talked about that. But he was more of a kind of a bioweapon idea of being able to control a brain. CIA loved this. So Delgado's experiments were kind of a spark for a nightmare that we're still living today, is the idea of RFID chips. And you can point to this gentleman who, guess what, is right there in Tulane with our Fauci 1.0, Dr. Asher, and all of them. And look at this quote. Sorry if it's blurry, but it says, "Can you avoid knowledge? You cannot. Can you avoid technology? You cannot. Things are going ahead in spite of ethics, in spite of your personal beliefs, in spite of everything." Jose Manuel Rodriguez Delgado. Isn't that an ugly, dark quote?
It's a
no matter what.
It's the truth, though. These lefties that are, all about, well, embryo is not a baby, is not a life. Then they create this half human, half, I can't remember if it was a monkey or a kangaroo or a pig or a whatever, but they created an embryo that was half human, half animal. And then
Right.
they argued that it was a life and that it shouldn't be destroyed
Right.
because they're such hypocrites. I mean, the whole thing is just, they're
Oh,
going
yeah.
to go ahead. There are no ethics in science.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Well, maybe there is for some, but for many it's not. And I think the life is cheapened. It's kind of thrown away and cast away just in the lab rats and the lab mice and the monkeys and that kind of thing. The sanctity of life seems to be lost. I know the research saves lives.
Well, and that neurosurgeon that he does all the stuff about red light being bad. Is it red or no, blue light being bad? And he's where I first heard about the monkey studies, and that they used to wire it into their brain to try to control them and whatever. And then they learned that they didn't even need the wires. They just needed blue light and alcohol to numb them out and get them to submit and control them, which is what they do with humans now.
That's correct. And I think you're talking about neurologist Jack Cruz.
Yes, Jack Cruz. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where we're going with in
Oh,
the
okay.
story. Way ahead. Way to go.
Yeah, sorry.
So in the late 1950s, there were two researchers, a Sarah and a Mary, and they both had the last name Stewart, but they weren't related to each other. But they were brilliant, and they were virus experts. And one was a nuclear physicist who also specialized in bone cancer. And again, this is in the 1950s. And Sarah was a virus expert. Well, they caught and they were recruited by Dr. Ashner to study the SV40 and that secret with SV40. And they were doing these secret testing in the New Orleans hospital. There on your left is Sarah Stewart, a cancer researcher. She lived to a nice, ripe old age. I unfortunately don't have a picture of Mary Stewart, also a cancer researcher, but wait till you hear about her accident. And she found that, well, By zapping SV40 with radiation, you could make cancers explode in size and growth, have rapid growth, and not shrink. By certain frequencies, you could accomplish this. And these discoveries, hence the CIA all over again, well, it was earth-shattering and it was exciting for them. But unfortunately, Mary died in 1964 in a bizarre accident in a lab, which seems to scream cover up because,
Right.
you know, she got burned by half of her body and in a lab accident, but she was found actually dead in her home. And if she's a doctor, why wouldn't she? And she's at a hospital, why wouldn't she get treatment right there? Right?
Right.
Pretty strange. But anyway, these two women were brilliant. And I don't know why we would think this way, but the same thing, the same time, early 60s, we have Fidel Castro, who sparks rapid cancer research. And I'm being facetious when I say he sparks rapid cancer research. Well, why? Because the mob did not like him. He threw out the casinos. They cost him millions. He was a communist. You know, your hardcore anti-communist individuals in the government wanted him out. We can't have communism 90 miles from the shores of Florida or from the shores of the United States. We need to take him out. So there were these all kinds of ways of thinking of how can we sneak a bomb into his residence, or, you know, how can we take him out? And he had unbelievable, you know, loyal, dedicated, shall we say, Secret Service agents surrounding him. It was very, you know, difficult. So they had to come up with a way. Well, here we go. Dr. Ashner again. He says, wow, Sarah, Mary, what you're doing there to speed up cancer, that's fascinating. I wonder if we could do a vaccine with this SV40 and then hit the patient with radiation in such a manner that they could die with cancer in days or weeks, and then nobody would know it was an actual murder because, oh, wow, he ended up dying of rapid cancer. You know, this was the idea. It's blood curdling when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Ugly. So, you know, the 1959 was the Castro Revolution. He takes power, and Ashner and the mob are furious. They want to take him out, so they come up with this diabolical plan to weaponize SV740 to kill him. Maybe we can lace it with his tobacco, or somehow get close to him and inject him with his cancer-causing virus. And the CIA was funding this all the way through. It's just pure evil. So guess who's also in Louisiana in the early 60s? Lee Harvey Oswald, the man of many hats. Interesting. Where is he at? He's working there. And remember, the idea here was that Fidel Castro would think, oh, well, he defected to the Soviet Union. You know, he's pro-communist. And they were thinking we could sneak him in there. Castro, he could get close to Castro, and he could be the person to actually take out Castro. Now, they were manipulating Lee Harvey Oswald because he had these delusions of grandeur that he was going to become some kind of famous hero, and they manipulated those promises of glory is what they did. And he was going to be the one, so they say, to be the delivery agent of this bioweapon to take out Castro.
Really? Okay.
Now, what gets interesting is in Louisiana, that same place with Lee Harvey Oswald are other individuals. Clay Shaw and David Ferrie. Most of you who've been following all this whole or watched the JFK movie will know these people. Clay Shaw was the businessman, the smooth talking operator, definitely CIA links. David Ferrie was the pilot, and he had very strange sexual behaviors as well, caught in different ways. So they probably could manipulate him. And he was also in the middle with all those lab experiments, and Oswald and everyone, and so was Clay Shaw. And so these individuals in right there in downtown New Orleans, real close to each other, are interacting with ways of taking out Castro. Is what we've learned, or Agent X has said. And they wanted, that was perfect. We'll send Lee Harvey Oswald, the Russian, fake defector or whatever. But in this group was also another woman by Judith Vary Baker. Have you heard of her, or does the name ring a bell?
It sounds familiar, but
she claims to be Oswald's girlfriend while they're in Louisiana, in New Orleans.
Oh,
and she was also a researcher, very, very bright young woman at the time,
okay.
Still with us today, extremely intelligent. And there's a picture of her there with none other than working on ways to cultivate cancer as causing a cancer-causing virus that could be spiked with the radiation and become a kill weapon, a kill strike, where it just washes your hands. There's no killer here. The person died of cancer. Here's a picture of her on the screen too, next to our JFK director, famous director, Oliver Stone.
So the Oliver Stone movie is the one that you're referencing, because there's many
yes,
JFK movies. So
thank you.
Yeah.
So she's in there in Louisiana with all these things that are going on. And it kind of sickens me that her innocence at 18 was exploited. And they had promised her, medical school.
Can you hear me?
He also knew, I think Ashner knew that they couldn't touch Jim Garrison. He was kind of untouchable. But get this, Garrison had a daughter, and her name was Virginia. Now, she's one of the daughters here in this picture, the family photo. But she worked with the neurosurgeon Jack Cruz, who you just mentioned, Lisa.
Okay, awesome.
What a strange, and guess where she's at? She's in the same lab that they were using way back when in the 50s and 60s.
Okay, so I'm sorry to interrupt you. It cut out for me, but I was hoping everybody could still hear. So can you back up just
of course
to let's see, we were on the Baker, Susan Baker screen. Yeah, I didn't hear a lot about Jim Garrison.
Okay, so Jim Garrison is a prosecutor, and he's the only prosecutor to get a conviction of Clay Shaw, the only conviction in the JFK assassination in New Orleans. And he knew the whole assassination case frontwards and backwards. And it's interesting because he had a daughter named Virginia. Virginia grows up to become a person who's working in the same lab in the 50s and the 60s that they were doing all of this polio and cancer research and God knows what for the CIA and the government and government funded, research. And she's at that same lab and works with neurosurgeon Jack Cruz, who you just mentioned.
Okay.
Ironic. The two of them start putting together the story that Agent X also has put together and spread is talking about. So it's fascinating how life gets kind of intertwined and people get intertwined into a story. So now we fast forward to the 70s. And we have Dr. Alton Ochsner, with the 1972 Stop Smoking campaign. Because why? Nixon knew him way back in the 50s. Remember, he's a front center during the polio vaccine rollout. Nixon was vice president under Eisenhower. Nixon and Dr. Ochsner knew each other. And it is believed, as Agent X says, that Nixon knew that the SV40 was going to, or whatever it was going to cause cancers 20, 30, 40, 50 years into the future. Well, he's now president. And not only does he want to start the war on drugs, but he's going to start the war on cancer. Dr. Alton Ochsner. So why? They can throw billions of dollars in cancer research.
To research. Mm-hmm.
Big pharma gets their big payday again. But this goes back to the Nixon era. So Dr. Ochsner, you see how he is really Fauci 1.0, almost identical. He's manipulating Nixon, or Nixon is working out a pay deal for himself and Big Pharma. Who knows? I don't have the details on that. But that's pretty eye-opening, and seeing how that's all tied together, because they're still trying to hide the whole SV40, right? But they know that millions are going to get sick, and they're going to be able to funnel billions into cancer research or hospitals or whatever. Mm-hmm. So now we fast forward another decade. We're into Dr. Fauci and Ronald Reagan. Dr. Fauci comes into power. He becomes the new CIA golden child. Bioweapons are now not handled in Louisiana. They're moved to Fort Detrick. Reagan signs the Bayh-Dole Act, which is another big pharma payoff. It allows us big pharma to generate these vaccines or cultivate vaccines and not get sued, not be held liable, because that would kill all the whole vaccine industry. And then what would we do if we didn't have vaccines? So Reagan lifts that with Dr. Fauci right there by his side. So now fast forward, Fort Detrick is now the bioweapons, charge. And they're right there with Dr. Fauci right there, the CIA golden, golden child. He's interacting with Fort Detrick, NIH, CIA, and who knows what else. So then we have Dr. Fauci and mRNA technology, and Peter Daszak with EcoHealth Alliance. Now, recently, China did their final paper, and they've essentially closed the case and said that the COVID virus came from America, probably Fort Detrick. We say it came from China, and it was the Wuhan lab had a leak. And irregardless if we were funding, gain of function research or not, that will still, let's say that's debatable. I have my personal feelings on that. I think you, Lisa, you and I probably share on that. But anyway, Peter Daszak with EcoHealth Alliance is all wrapped up in the Wuhan labs. The wet market's only 7.5 miles away. They kind of put this two and two together and say that it came from China, that it should be called the China virus. Well, should it? I don't know. Now, today's world, we have what? We have phone technology, different forms of frequency and radiation. We have SV40. Does it have a role in the mRNA and the COVID, vaccines? Well, everyone said no, it didn't. And others point and say, no, Agent X is full of shit. There's no SV40 in these vaccines. So the smoking gun would be, would we find SV40 in the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines? Well, remember when these two researchers said that the SV40 could be used and with certain radiation could cause turbo cancers? Right. But they didn't use the word turbo. They just, rapid, growth of cancer. Well, then these researchers, Kevin McKernan and Philip Buchholz, both confirmed independently that the 2023 Pfizer virals were laced with SV40.
Wow.
So if we go back to our ugly doctor, Dr. Ochsner, knowing that cancer would be potentiality with SV40 in vaccines. And we know now the SV40 is in the mRNA shots. And now we have more radiation in cell towers than we ever had, and cell phones, and all kinds of different wavelengths of all types of radiation, even from the sun. Are those causing with the SV40 and the radiation from various sources, that's what's causing these terrible cancers? I don't know. I'm not a doctor. But that's
I don't know either, but they are saying that the levels of colon cancer in men, young men, like 20s, is the highest rate it's ever been. Well, where do they keep their where do they keep their phones?
right.
In their pocket, and
Yep.
my sister died at a very young age in her early 40s of a glioblastoma, and
As did my mother.
that's right.
And my father. Yeah. Both my parents.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I just saw RFK Jr. speaking about, I don't know if this month is glio awareness or brain cancer awareness or something, but he was talking about glios and how aggressive they are, and
Right.
radiation affecting them and all that.
Right.
And yeah, it's
terrifying. It's terrifying to think that we had someone in the
on purpose.
1950s lace vaccines against polio with SV40, knowing what it could do with soft tissue cancer, knowingly do that. And a researcher get canceled as a whistleblower. And we had another one with a fire breakout in a lab and found dead in her home. There's countless other people in the know. How about let's go back to Ferry, who was the pilot during the whole Bay of Pigs and the early 1960s. He knew too much, and he has a very suspicious death. And he was right in the middle of all that with Baker, Oswald, Clay Shaw, Garrison, right in the middle of all that. And so there you have it.
The only drug or weapon that they've been doing this with. Can't remember if it was on like the Johnny Carson show or one of those tonight or evening talk show things, and they were like, it was one of these like Hollywood guys, and he's talking about killing, like, is it Magic Johnson or Shaq or one of those guys, and he's talking about, well, maybe you just kind of, put a little how they used to have the heart attack gun or whatever. Well, I guess they put the AIDS, which Fauci created, the what was that medicine they gave them to try to kill the people with AIDS after they gave it?
Yeah. And they did the Buyers Club
Yes. Yeah.
movie. Yes. Yeah, Fauci was all over that.
But they were talking like on the stage, and he's like, yeah, what if you just, happen to walk by a guy and, just brush him, and he ends up getting something that some disease that just wipes him out and kills him. I mean, this is not a new thing, but then to weaponize it and put it out to the masses, we've known there were these depopulation agendas, but to see it play out like this, and then to see these normies on Facebook and elsewhere, sit there and get upset because somebody made a meme of the Pope when, he's covering up for pedophile priests and the Pope, that is, and and all this kind of stuff. And then this kind of stuff is going on, and they're happy to take their second, fifth, fourth, 10th booster. I mean, at some point, I watched a Jim Willey interview on Untold History, and he's like, the stupidest people in the back of the room, at some point, you just stop answering their questions, but it's horrifying. It really is horrifying.
Agent X, and I think also Dr. Jack Cruz said that, and I want to say it was in the 60s, they actually injected and someone who was on death row in Louisiana
Mhm.
with this cancer-causing virus as a test, and it was, CIA funded, and he died on death row from cancer. Let me give you another one. There was a Dr. Joy who was a psychiatrist who visited Jack Ruby while he was in prison after shooting Oswald. And he was there to determine if he was sane or not for trial. And he also gave him an injection, same time period. Guess what happened, Jack Rubenstein, he
Mhm.
died in prison
Mhm.
of cancer.
Of course.
And if on the screen here, I have a speech that it's called Decentralized Medicine. It's from December of last year, and it's Dr. Jack Cruz, and he's now in El Salvador working with the Salvadorian government to create medical, shall we say, a bill of rights for medical safety, and that we have a right to deny certain medical treatments, such as a vaccine, maybe an untested vaccine or certain medication, whatever. Or if we want to try a vaccine or try some kind of medication to think it might help, it's in studies or trial and knowingly take it, these kinds of things. But it has to be written into the Constitution. So he's been working with RFK Jr. and some others. And the two lawyers with RFK said that this would never pass in the US. It would never get through Congress. It probably wouldn't even ever get out of committee. And so we, the land of the free, we're having to try to get this passed in its entirety. Even bits and pieces of it wouldn't pass in the US. We have to try to get it passed in bits and pieces in El Salvador or in its full entirety, as an example. So that's where Jack is right now, working on that with RFK Jr., by the way.
I would think that, our right to not trespass would count against our bodies, that we wouldn't need to amend the Constitution. It would
It should.
just be, maybe they need to, somebody needs to be held accountable for some of these crimes, and maybe that needs to go through,
Right.
be held as an example, but I don't know that it needs to be amended.
Well, we obviously need to fight against medical tyranny, right?
Right.
And I, Robert Kennedy gets it. I'm not saying that I was a fan for him to run for president or anything like that.
Same.
I'm just saying
Yeah.
that he's educated in this, and he's sat down numerous hours with Dr. Jack Cruz about this very conversation we're having tonight and the history of cancers, and how operatives of the CIA shouldn't take matters in their own hands and decide, devastations for generations.
Yeah.
Cancer causing, injections, knowing that it's going to explode in 30, 40, 50 years. You and I, Lisa, probably have seen how over the past couple of decades, how more and more people are dying from cancer, more so than we were, much younger when we were kids. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience have seen that too, how it's growing. And some will say, well, we're living longer. And
No.
cancer is something that comes from age. And is it? But it's heart-wrenching to see a loved one, go through these things. And my wife fought cancer, and I lost both parents from cancer, brain tumors. And it gets you angry. It puts you in a very dark place when you start thinking it's like stamped government approved, or government allowed, or government, I'm going to turn and look the other way. You do your thing. I don't want to know. And so thank you for letting me have this mic tonight to talk about Agent X's story,
Absolutely.
Dr. Jack Cruz story. And You can search up Decentralized Medicine, Jack Kruse. You might still find it on YouTube. If not, go to Library or Odyssey and you'll find it there for sure. It hasn't been deleted there.
Yeah. We had done, I'd done a show, I don't know, it's been maybe a couple months or could have been even up to a year ago, but where I first run across, well, it was the last time I went to Westwood, so it would have been about 6 months ago. And because Charlie and I listened to it all the way up there, and it was about a 6-hour interview that Jack Kruse did. And that was my first exposure to him. And he talked about all of this with, and that's where I heard about the monkeys and the blue light and the cancer and the SV40 and all of that kind of stuff. But it was another thing that angered me. Just like when I first was introduced to my little book, Fruit from a Poisonous Tree, and I heard about the testing that went on. World War II never ended, that Operation Paperclip was brought here, and that, you know, we've been chemically, us and our military have been chemically treated for years. I do want to share one bit of good news and hope. There was an executive order signed today by Trump to end federal funding for gain of function.
That's huge.
Virus research. So gain of function, you know, as this Gorgon Rust, which is this funny account that I follow, is the real, it just means how do you maximize death from or weaponize the most death from a drug.
Locked up. I see your mouse moving, but it locked up, Lisa.
Oh yeah, it sure did. Yeah.
There it goes. Now I can hear you talking. Now
okay. No, it's cutting me out. It doesn't want me to say this stuff.
There we go. Probably. See if it'll.
Okay, I'm going to play the clip, but this executive order
went very good
today.
The first relates to gain of function research. Gain of function research is a type of biomedical research where pathogens are adulterated, viruses are adulterated to make them more potent or to change the way that they function. Many people believe that gain of function research was one of the key causes of the COVID pandemic that struck us in the last decade. What this executive order does, first of all, it provides powerful new tools to enforce the ban on federal funding for gain of function research abroad. It also strengthens other oversight mechanisms related to that issue and creates an overarching strategy to ensure that biomedical research in general is being conducted safely and in a way that ultimately protects human health more.
It's a big deal. It could have been that we wouldn't have had the problem we had.
Right? A lot of people say that, sir.
If we had this done earlier. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. That happened today, Lisa?
Yeah, this was today.
Ironic. And here we're doing the show tonight on this subject.
Mm-hmm.
Ironic. Wow. We're plugged into the matrix, Lisa.
Oh, I know we are. I can feel it every day.
Oh my. They don't want this discussed. That's for sure. They don't want this discussed. Shadow ban.
That's for sure. There's a bunch of stuff coming out about Alcatraz that we're going to be talking about on Wednesday with Skullcap.
Ooh, that'd be good.
So I think that's going to be really good. There's 7s everywhere.
That's so expensive to do that. I would be so much cheaper to put up a prison in Nevada in the desert or something, or the deserts of California than Alcatraz. I know Alcatraz has got that name and it's got that mystique about being, you know, unescapable, even though that's questionable, and all these things. Well, you know what? Would be so expensive to redo that rock, that little island there in the bay.
It'll be interesting to see what happens in this movie.
I don't think it's big enough. Maybe they should just
corrupt judges,
walls around Congress and lock all of them up.
Well, my husband brought up a good point. You know, where do you put all the corrupt judges? Because they can't go in the prisons with all the people that they've arrested previously.
Ooh, good point. Good point. I used to say they need to create a prison where it's only got one tunnel in and one tunnel out, and you just use and it's in the desert, and you just do a helicopter drop for provisions. You survive it, you survive. If you don't, you don't. And that tunnel, they call your name, you can exit that tunnel. If it's anybody else, you're shot dead on the spot, other than that individual.
Sounds like Hunger Games.
Yeah, that's my feeling on it.
Turnabout's fair play.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great presentation. And when the truth is scarier than fiction, makes for a very scary bedtime story.
It
But
does. It
that's
doesn't.
where we are, folks.
It's dark.
It is
but
very dark.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thanks everybody in the chat. And Skullcap, yeah, I want that PDF. I'll reach out to you.
Right. Thank you guys for joining us in the chat. Make sure to leave a like and a comment. We appreciate you being here, and we will see you tomorrow here on The New Normal. Take care.